Hi, I'm Ronnie from Ronny's Garage, and we're having our monthly tech meet for the Rolls-Royce Owners Club of Southern California. Today we're going to be taking apart a GM Hydramatic 4-speed transmission that they used in the R-Types and Silver Cloud series. Well, most rings are cast iron. Piston rings are cast iron. I mean, there's nothing special. They get chrome plated, but...
I'm blowing away.
There's still fluid in this.
And this will go.
These are heavy. So right now I'm draining because there's always some left over in there. I'm going to pull the pan off.
The ring spec.
Let's see, what should I do first for these?
What are these rings supposed to be doing?
They seal off fluid passages. That's what they do. And there's 3 passages, I think. No, actually there's 2.
They are in concert with each other. I don't understand.
Sorry?
You say passages, so that implies do they work as a unit or do they work individually?
Each passage has a certain job. If I knew these things really well, I'd be able to tell you what each one of these passages in here did. If you take this apart, there's probably about 80 pieces in here. So there's a lot of passages, and it's kind of like a dance with all these pressures. The mechanics are pretty simple.
The governor, as it changes its, the speed, and that weight flies out. Is there an actuating rod in that valve? Can you see that inside that?
There's valves inside here in passages that have different shapes. They have steps on them. And the way the transmission knows when to shift and when to downshift, it has to do with the speed and the pressure you're putting on with the gas pedal. So they kind of work together and against each other in ways. So I'm not going to get that technical because I don't understand it well enough. Man's got to know his limitations, right?
And this transmission is primarily developed during World War II.
Right, it's old. As you can see, there are bend over tabs you can put on this too. You can bend those over.
Yes, very large. It started during the war.
This is different from any American transmission for an American car because first of all, they didn't have a servo out drive. So this was adapted for Rolls-Royce. The center cases are pretty similar on the ones, the American cars that I've done. But this back end is different completely.
Are they interchangeable?
Some of the parts were. No, I don't think so. I don't think so. They have different bolt patterns for the pan. So what I'm going to do now is start taking off this back end. This is the reverse cone unit, plus it has the servo drive. This up here is the speedometer cable drive.
So, Ronnie, since this was adapted for Rolls-Royce, are all the bolts and stuff British?
These are not British bolts. This is American. Proud. Arr.
Look for the union label.
Means you overpaid, right? The union label. I don't know about that. There we go. Isn't that cute? I just love this. Big aluminum gear with big teeth. Turns that gigantic speedometer cable. You guys have seen that on the Cloud, right? It's probably about that big in diameter. Big, round thing. And that's what makes your speedometer work. Okay. Now this is a servo out drive, and I've been into these before. I think I had a transmission when I described the way the servo works. So when you overhaul a servo in the car, the brake servo, and you replace the clutch, you have to pull this housing off to replace the seal in there, because 9 times out of 10 the problem with the clutch is it gets oil on it. So it's like putting oil on your brakes, they don't stop. Putting oil on the clutch or the servo drive will make it not grab. So that makes your brakes not work also. So once I get it off, I'll show you. This is like a little deflector to keep oil and water from coming up. They usually get pretty beat up. And this is some sort of assembly date code, I think, riveted on there.
There's a label there that says, like, who made this gearbox?
And all the patent numbers, license numbers.
Yeah.
That servo you're working on, removing, is that the brake servo?
This is the drive for the brake servo.
So that's like the oldest panel, right? So-
They licensed it from Hispano.
Yeah.
This is the servo that mounts up on there. So this is what, this is the power assist for the brakes.
Correct.
And I have not had the good fortune to work on a Hispano, so I don't know much about that. I know that the owner of that has one, but I haven't
There's
touched
those
it.
little comparables.
Garage has a simple version of it.
I think,
Garage uses
oh, yeah. On their, well, if only on their Grand Prix.
Okay, now. Snip this off. All right, there's the seal I was talking about. Okay, that seals against this, keeps the transmission fluid on this side, and keeps it from coming out on the other side.
And that's the seal that went bad?
No.
No.
That's for the braking. The seal that went bad, just so you know, is this one.
Which one?
This one. There's one right in here. Now, it's great you brought that up. You could just pull the front cover off, pop that seal out, put a new one in, and put it together, and it probably will fix it. But behind this pump, this is the front pump, there is a paper gasket behind there that, doing that shortcut once taught me never to do it again, because that was leaking also. It's a lot of work to get it out, put it back in. So I always take them, I'll show you how far you have to go to get the front pump out. You don't have to take this back end apart. But I always replace that gasket with some sealer, because I've been bit.
And when you found that out, it was back in the car, and you had to take it back out again?
Yeah,
and fix
well,
it?
you start it up and you run it and you fill it up and there's still fluid coming out. Not a good situation. All right.
Paper gaskets on the inside of the case, right?
It's between the case and the pump. I'll show it to you when we get it apart. We'll slowly get all this stuff apart. There's a lot of fluid in these things. All right, I want to get this thing all out of here so I can...
Nope.
That's just the bearing housing. All right. There we go.
What's a brass gear?
It's a brass gear, yeah. And this one's in really good shape. Sometimes they're almost razor edge thin. And that's what drives the servo. So what you've got, there's another bearing shell over here, and this sits in there with the housing. There's a shim and this. Basically that make it go like this. This goes on there, and on the opposite end there's this little plate, and it's got a shoulder and it's got these Belleville washers, right? Belleville it's a spring-loaded washer. It's not flat. It's got a cone shape. And the proper way to put these in, I've seen them all stacked up in the same direction. That's wrong on this. When you put them back in, you have to put two of them opposing, so there's a gap in the middle, and then this one, another one going facing away, so there's a gap on the outside, and that goes against the bearing. And this shoulder right here rides against the center part. So what they do is apply spring pressure on that to keep it from walking around. I don't know why they couldn't just machine it so it fit perfect, but they're tapered roller bearings, so they want to keep tension on them. All right. Okay, now I want to pull this thing off, so I've got to pull this rear seal retainer off. All right. There we we go. That's where the rear seal goes. That holds oil inside the transmission, keeps it from running out the back. This housing here, this is the reverse cone. And once you get it apart and see it, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But you got to pull that off. There are 6 bolts that hold it on. One of them is that parking pawl bolt, which we saw. Remember that shaft that went in through here with that parking mechanism rotated on? And the rest are all 9/16ths. And then there's one in here also that you have to pull this little drain plug out to get to. So it's all right, there's one bolt.
Same deal, different length?
Yeah, they're all the same length. Good question. Well, this one is not though. This one long one. Okay. Now it'd be nice if I could just pull that off, but you can't because this bearings on here is pretty tight fit. So I got a puller I use.
It's time for, go to the hospital.
Now, so what I'm doing, I threaded into the holes for this rear plate. I got some long bolts and a steering wheel puller, and it's starting to move already. This is a special tool.
But those,
It's a croissant.
like a 350
It's metric, British Standard, and American. Here we go.
It's a fun car to drive.
man, they don't even start breathing until about 80. And from 80 to 120, that's when they have the sweet
There we go.
spot. Man, they control.
All right.
And if you don't have this puller, forget about it.
What?
If you don't have this puller, forget about it.
Well, see, it's kind of cobbled together. It's not a special tool. These are standard automotive tools. I have in the past used a rubber mallet and banged them off, but this just seems to work so nice.
Yeah, comes out straight.
Yeah. But since you're being watched, you
This is going down. This is video history here, right? I'm got a weird phone call the other. This is the reverse cone. So when this car is put into reverse, and it's what happens is one band, the front band comes on, and then this cone right here, as you can see, it's kind of tapered, and this is tapered here. It pushes in and locks it up, is what it does.